Just reminds me of the rain.
You wow.
Well, we live now, so I'm just gonna roll with it.
As you should. I am clicking the boom. There it is. All right. So, welcome to this week's edition of When Men Are Intimate. Thank you, Jason.
Mhm.
The comic relief is just everything every week. I appreciate you.
And it's a survival tactic right now. My son was up at 1 and 3 and 5. I'm hurt,
Oh,
but I'm here.
1, 3, and like a clock
in the morning.
Oh, that's like every night in my house.
Oh,
that was a
no.
one-time thing for you?
Yeah.
Oh.
1, 3.
Y'all be thinking I'll be playing when I'm like, no, the kids wake up all night long every night and I barely sleep. Like, no, that's real. Like,
oh no,
it's a thing.
I couldn't do it.
Okay,
that's what I said.
Well, praise the Father. So this is When Men Are Intimate Live. Thank you for joining us wherever you're joining us from. I know that there's a lot of places that you're joining us. Like we're trying this Instagram and Twitter thing today. We're over on Facebook and YouTube. So wherever you're joining us, just drop it in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from. Say hi to us. When Men Are Intimate is a public expression of a private commitment. We're just a group of brothers who have decided to live life with each other. And this is and this is our public expression of that, right? And so some of these conversations are reminiscent of the conversations that happen in our private group chat. But we got something special for y'all this week.
Special?
We are bringing in one of the other brothers from When Men Are Intimate. And I feel like he's one of those people who don't really need an introduction.
Yes, he does.
What I am going to do is bring him in, and then I'm going to ask all of the brothers for you to tell everybody who's watching who Sean Korey is to you. All right. So let's bring him in and give him his flowers. What's up, brother?
What's popping? That's a lot. That's a lot.
My dog.
We in this thing. All right, who want to start? Let's give him his flowers.
Sean Korey reminds me of like I always wanted to be friends with Prince, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like somebody that like could be a symbol or could be like somebody formerly known as somebody or could go by the name depending on the stage of life they're in, right?
That's why
Sean Korey is like a principle. He's like a concept. Like Sean Korey is freedom.
That's so good.
He is artistry.
He's wealth.
He is leadership. He is wealth. Jesus. But like Sean Korey is flow. Like he, where other people run into their own resistance in situations, he flows through and around them with the creativity and with the freedom and with those things. He is just a concept. He is ever changing and ever growing and ever evolving, which is what makes him consistent. I don't know how that makes any sense, but it makes total sense.
Hey man, it's just
Sean Korey.
It's just who Sean Korey is to you. You know what I mean? Like,
it's wild that y'all just keep on saying Sean Korey. Like,
you said like I right here.
I feel like I'm talking in third person.
Who's next? Jump right in there.
So since we're already here, Sean Korey is like it's almost like Nas is like if y'all remember that song. Well, Nas is like that's almost Sean Korey. Just you added he is that, but he's kind of like a chameleon, but not really at the same time. Here's what I mean. So like he has a nag to, I think, blend in any space that he's in, and not just blend in that space, but like really be a part of it. And he's still very much himself. So even though he can vibe with you, even though he can connect with you, he's still gonna be him. But you're gonna feel such a connectedness to relatability. How about that? That's easy.
Relatability.
He has such a relatability about him because like, not to put like your government out there, this man during the day works on supercomputers and at night takes amazing photos and artistry like on the side on top of like everything else he does. So like I've never really
night.
seen
At night, he turns into a supercomputer.
That's on during the day.
Listen, basically. And so like I don't think I've really met many people that are like an expression of left and right brain every day of their life. Usually if somebody's creative, they're going to be creative like all day. But somebody's more analytical, they're going to be analytical all day. He's both all day. And it's like, where they do that at Sean Korey, that's where they do that at. So yeah, if you need to be heard, he'll hear you out. If you need to be challenged, he's going to challenge you. If you need to be just loved and accepted, he'll do that as well. So that is the man, the myth, the legend.
That's wild.
The icon.
Money.
All right. So there was one word that came to mind immediately. And of course, you guys know what I did. I went and looked at the definition, right?
I thought that was going to be Jason. Usually that's Jason. What's the toss-up?
So
50-50.
the first thing I thought about was the first word that came to mind was anomaly. That's what I thought about. And so the definition, according to Merriam-Webster, I'm going to read 1 and 2 because I like both of those. Something different, abnormal, peculiar, or not easily classified. I really like that part. They're not easily classified. And then a deviation from the common rule. So to me, when I think of Sean Korey, since that's what we're doing right now, to me, that embodies the encounter that I've had in my experience with him.
Yeah, that's good.
That's dope. I've never been referred to as an anomaly.
Yeah, I think that's a good word. I would say that like upon meeting Korey, like it was like we got each other pretty quickly. Like I feel like how you live your life on like the outside is how I think I live my life on the inside. And so like some of the stuff, like when we're talking, like there's a whole lot that don't need to be explained. Like you would have to be on the phone with me and like with me and Korey, like our phone conversations don't have a lot of words attached to them. You know what I'm saying? So like there isn't a whole lot of explanation that happens, but we know exactly what the other person is talking about. It's because like I don't know if you ever heard of the concept like twin flames, but there's this concept of twin flames where it's just that like there's another person who is like not your opposite but your complement, and so like it just works, right? And that's what that feels like. Like if he lived in Cleveland, I'm sure we'd spend way more time together. And I know that doesn't tell you who he is to me. Well, maybe I guess it does. It doesn't necessarily explain who he is, unless you know who I am, which maybe you do, maybe you don't. But how my inner thoughts work is that like his whole vibe is, it's you make everything swaggy. You know what I mean? Just like, everything's cooler because he's there. Like it's just, it's a great thing. It's a great thing. All right, man. Tell the people who you is, bro.
I appreciate it. I'm Sean Korey. I'm everything that they just said.
Even that was just so cool. Like that's just so cool to say. You don't have to say nothing else.
Oh, that's wild. I'm like that's wild. I'm not used to like that, and that's amazing. But yeah, I'm work full time at the military base doing facility engineering for supercomputing, but I'm also a creative, from graphics to photography. And God is stepping me into like ministry things and all that. So yeah,
And all that is correct.
I'm a husband. I'm a father. Yeah.
All right, so listen, we're gonna jump right into the conversation tonight then, because this is the last When Men Are Intimate live before the new year. Fun fact: this is really like a challenge. It was a challenge between the four of us who was on, me, Darius, Jason, and Maurice, to hold each other accountable to being more present online, right? And so like we decided to do it, and we've been doing it every single week. Y'all been growing with us, rocking with us, especially our guy Brian. Like, I don't know that he's missed one. You know, like my guy's been here every week.
Locked in.
He was at Women Intimate Live before it was cool. And so
Is it cool now? When did that
yeah,
happen?
it's definitely cool now. Shot Korey.
You see the
definitely cool now. Like y'all got lights on. Like
That's when it got official.
It got super cool. Y'all like Korey shows up and you guys put on lights. Like now everybody's glowing for some reason. Like it's fantastic. But I think one of the most common conversations that we have at the end of the year is that of vision, right? What are you going into the new year to talk about, right? What are you chasing after? What direction does God have you in, and all of these things? And I want to hit it from a couple of different directions, if you guys don't mind. Like, I want to talk about like what vision is. What does that mean? And as men who are all married, like what does that look like for your families? And how do you get vision, right? Like, what does that even look like? And then eventually I want Darius to come talk to us a little bit about like some of the stuff that he heard about distorted vision, which I think shall be an interesting wrinkle in our conversation. But first, I just kind of want to throw it out there, like as a question, like, what is vision? Like, how do you get that? What do people mean when they say like, I got a vision for my life next year? What does that even mean?
The question you just asked at the end almost like is a total off ramp. Which one?
Well, which one was the off ramp?
When people say like they got a vision for their life, I feel like it's a different question than what is vision and how do you envision your year.
Fair. So answer whichever one you want to answer, and we'll go from there. Like,
I'm not going to answer none of them. I'm gonna wait. Let's see what direction you gentlemen take this in.
My biggest
Go for it.
Okay. My biggest understanding of vision is actually perception. How we're able to perceive things, and how that aligns with who we are, spiritually, who we are physically, who we are emotionally. So when I say perception, there's many times that we move in a way that we're just haphazardly moving through life. But vision is being able to perceive God in every moment of life and allowing that to be a direction that you have. I know there's like a general understanding of vision of like, oh, I see my future. But I think perception of how God sees where we are positioned, because his lens is always eternal. So even now is the future, even now is the past, even now is present. There's layers upon layers of who he is and how he perceives things. His lens is eternal. So our perception of who we are in him in any given moment is what I feel vision should be, if that makes sense.
I'm rolling with it. All right. Perception, right? I if nobody's gonna jump in, I'm gonna drill down a little bit more. Like, I hear Christians all the time around this part of the year say that God has given me a vision for my life next year. They have given me a word for my life next year, and like some of that is legit. Some of it is just like you just want to say something before the end of the year, and I get that. That's fine. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever cooks your grits. You know what I mean? Like, do you think? Like, but I'm trying to like figure out like
whatever cooks your grits.
whatever cooks your grits. You know what I mean? Like
Whether it's milk, whether it's water, well, hey,
yeah,
whatever you want to do.
some people use chicken stock. You know what I mean? Like, do what you do. Okay,
what you
like
do.
do your thing. What I'm
Shipping
trying
grits,
to
maybe.
get right,
Oh,
what I'm
sure.
trying to
Okay.
understand
Yeah.
is what is this thing, and like how do you get it, right? Like
Mhm.
because like not everybody watching us is like super deep into their faith. You know what I mean? So like, what does this mean? What is this idea of vision?
For me, as I'm sitting here thinking about it, I'm like, is there kind of like a one sentence that I feel like could encapsulate it? I don't know, but I'm gonna give it a try. I think vision is God's blueprint for my life lived out. God's blueprint for my life lived out. So I think in saying it that way, it encompasses everything. So it's not just focused on one thing, but focused on like all of the things. Because you mentioned Dylan, like, okay, with all of us being married and us having children and everything like that, how does that all play into vision? I think it all plays into God's blueprint of our lives, of our marital status, of of kids, of career choices, of hobbies, relationships, like all of it. If we're truly following Holy Spirit and His leading, it's His blueprint on how everything should look. And so if I get on track to His blueprint, I think that's vision, or could be a given definition of vision.
All right.
Come on, coach.
I'm gonna call vision imagination, and I'm gonna say when a person has a clear imagination, they have the ability to divinely imagine, right? Like you can see what is possible, you could see the potential, you can see the growth, right? Because faith and imagination are very linked.
Yes.
As is mental illness or mental disturbance or limiting beliefs, right? You lack imagination. You can't even imagine things getting better. You can't imagine good scenarios. You can't imagine positivity, right? So I feel like vision is like in my mind's eye, I tap into my imagination and then I begin to in imagination and blueprint, they kind of do relate to one another and go together, right? I'm seeing what is possible, and because I see it, it now anchors my faith or roots or grounds my faith, and then I begin walking in it. So I think vision is very tied to imagination, what it is that you can see and imagine inwardly. And I would even say, I'll even go as far as to say, in my life right now, half of the conversation that Ash and I are having, we've been reading books together, listening to certain things together, and it's all about how do you shift your imagination. We're having conversations like, oh yeah, that only costs $50,000. Like we've just been having conversations that don't make no sense based on our lifestyle because we have to imagine a life that's totally different than we've ever lived. So I'm going with imagination.
I flipping love that.
Yeah. This is good. Bishop, you got anything?
Honestly, not really, because for me, I was headed in the same direction as Maurice, but I think that the way Maurice worded it, there really isn't much else for me to add to it.
Fair enough.
But for me, imagination, yeah, it's about your imagination, what you're doing internally, how it comes from the inside out.
So then if it comes from the inside out, it has to be grounded in something.
Exactly.
Right. So what is it grounded in? So like,
It depends on your
that's
belief system.
Exactly.
so let's talk about it, right? Let's
Yeah,
talk about it. Like, I mean, I
it
want us
depends
to
on your
like
belief
frame
system.
this in a situation that like somebody who is a believer, right? Like believes in God, believes in Christ, but is never engaged in something like this at the end of the year, right? Or like going into another year, had never had those kinds of conversations. Like, what does that look like? Where is it grounded from? Like, what am I supposed to be doing to like clean it up, if you will, right? Like you talked
Yeah.
about perception, you talked about imagination. Like, what do I do to how do I get this going? Right? Like, how did I get the juices flowing? How do I know I've hit the right thing? So I know what I'm focused on for the next year, right?
And I think that's important because, like Maurice, you were saying that like imagination is closely tied to faith, but I think it's also closely tied to disbelief, because depending on what you're rooted in, you can have a strong imagination, and if it's not rooted and grounded in your faith or in God, it could you can imagine things that are to your detriment and follow those things and lean on those things. So I think
which is anxiety. That's literally anxiety.
yeah.
Million
I'll
percent.
say more about that because anxiety is a big deal. So try to make the bridge for it.
So basically, if and I hope I do my wife proud in saying this, anxiety is basically when you create scenarios, like when you create scenarios in your mind that haven't happened.
Mm.
So like, oh man, I have anxiety about this conversation because in my mind, I already ran through the conversation. This person's gonna dog me out, call me everything but a child of God, and there's gonna be tears, weeping, and gnashing of teeth. But you haven't even had the conversation. You didn't even dial the phone. Like your phone's in your room. You haven't even made the move there yet. You really don't know what's gonna happen, but because of your imagination, you've created this whole and concocted this whole scenario of this is if I do this, this is how it's gonna go. And so now you're crippled to make that conversation that could even really heal your heart and heal that relationship, but you won't do it because this is how it's gonna go. So, and that's an example of how anxiety can show up, and that's the negative B side of imagination.
I mean,
So Charmaine, after that.
ultimately, God, right, gave man the ability to think ahead. And the difference between anxiety and planning or preparation is that you are either rehearsing something that prepares you for victory or rehearsing something to prepare yourself for annihilation, right? So,
Nope. Rerun. Run that
rewind,
back. Run that back.
right? So when you think ahead to something and you visualize yourself overcoming the obstacle, doing the dang thing and winning it, right? Like getting to the other side of it. That's something that every great athlete does. That's something great actors do. Like, you know what I mean? Like us, all of the people on this, when we're in our oil and we're doing what we do, we've thought through it. We've seen ourselves do it. We practiced it and repped it and prepared on the inside. So when it comes out, it's just like we saw it. Some difference, but it's just like we saw it. When I'm in a dark place, I have rehearsed the tragedy before the tragedy comes or the devastation. I've started picturing all the different ways that it'll fall apart in the end, right? Greatest example I can give you was being a Browns fan, right? I've been in Cleveland Browns Stadium. There's 30,000 people in the stadium, right?
Right.
The team is winning in the fourth quarter. We should all be calm, but the whole place just feels uncomfortable. Because we've seen in the past the team fall apart so many times when it gets close that we all get nervous and we start seeing all the different things that can happen and go bad. And not only are we thinking it, but they're thinking it on the field, right? This year, the Browns have been finding a way to win no matter what happens. Something on the inside of them, when they think to the moment where things could go wrong, they see that things are going to go right somehow, some way. We got this. We will win. Jump off the bandwagon if you want to. We going to win this thing. That's the kind of words they're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that in the end, when you ask how does a person prepare, you sit down and you envision, what do I want to see in my life in the new year, and where do I seem to be in the direction of, like, what seems to be God's will. And then you begin to mentally prepare yourself for the victory, for the growth that it will take. Am I willing to grow and willing to evolve and willing to mature into the person I'll need to be to accomplish what I need to accomplish in that new thing, in that new year? I think that it goes a lot with that.
Like that. Charmaine threw this in the chat, and I think that like it's the next part of our conversation there, right? How do you line up that imagination with God's will for your life, right? So how it's the how, not necessarily the what, like the how of it.
Yeah.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Korey.
No, you good. You ain't spoke that much. Go ahead.
So for me, the biggest thing.
What's up, Neil?
So for me, the biggest thing is like the foundation of it all, right? I immediately think about your gates, and what are you constantly feeding yourself, right? We have to renew our mind in order for the transformation to ever happen. And so it comes by us spending time in his word, spending time getting familiar with his voice, spending time in his presence, doing the little stuff, if you will, that builds upon, because unless we allow ourselves to get to that point where we're connected to his spirit in such a way that he can reveal himself to us, then it's almost it's futile to try to do it on your own, right? And so there's two scriptures that came to mind, and those of you, if you was looking at me, I was all in my phone because I was looking at them. But I think about John 15, right? First and foremost, I think about John 15 and abiding, and how it talks about how you abide in him. And when you have the opportunity, I just encourage you to read it, because it literally we have to read the whole thing. But understanding that, like, you know, you could go back into scripture where it talks about, you know, his ways are not our ways and his thoughts are not our thoughts, right? But then when we come over to this side, or as everything happens through the fruition of Christ dying and resurrecting, we now have access to his ways and to his thoughts by his spirit, right? And then for me, I think about 2 Corinthians, where was I at?
10.
No, actually, I think I was in 2 Corinthians 2. And just talking about who knows, no man knows the spirit. I mean, no one knows a man better than his spirit. And the same thing goes for God, right? And this is a synopsis of it. But we can only know who God is based off of us being connected to his spirit. We can only know his ways based off of his spirit revealing his ways to us. And so it's a renewing of the mind that has to take place. But like I said, the basic starts with you taking the time to begin to get to know him, get to be like, when it comes to reading scripture, when it comes to being in his presence, when it comes to being intentional on getting to know him. Anything that we have become good at, we spend a lot of time doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You're a great warrior because you're always thinking about what's wrong. Like, that's the reason why you're a great warrior. Like, you're great at certain things because of how much time you put in towards it. And so a lot of us, and D, you kind of mentioned this earlier, you can do all the things and still be apart from him. Or you can be a believer, but you're not doing the things that come along with it, right? That's the better way to put it. Because I can say that I'm believing, I can say that, but if the only time I'm spending time with God is when I go to a service once or twice a week, then you can look at your own life and tell me how well those relationships you are person to person with the ones that you don't spend that much time with.
Yeah.
And then that's an indicator of the natural of how well your relationship probably is with God, or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
Can I take an off ramp on this one? Just real quick. Just this part. I've been thinking about this. And sometimes when we talk about our relationship with God, we talk about it like it's completely our responsibility. Is that how we should be approaching it? Is my question.
Well, here's the thing. God is always willing. He's always going to play his part. So the work resides with us. I mean, he's a gentleman, right? So he's not going to force a matter that we're running from. But he also said, if you make your bed in hell, I'll be there with you. So he's always doing his part. So I think in a sense, then, yeah, it is always on us, because we have to make the effort, the conscious effort to make our abode in him. If we abide in him, to make our abode in him, that's we have to choose our residence. When you talk about abiding, you're talking about where you're living, where you identify as your address. When I come home to my address, I know that that's my address. When I'm away, it doesn't mean that it's not my address. I still identify. When I put on my paperwork to sign up for a loan, to sign a resume, to do anything, I'm still putting that residence down. So it's where I choose to live, where I choose to abide. That has to be my choice. If I choose to that I'm not going to abide here, that I'm going to live under a bridge, that's my choice. There might be circumstances that led me there. There's a choice in the matter.
Yeah, I think one of the major things that the reason why it's all on us is because he stands at the door and knocks.
He's waiting for us to answer.
So the reality is it's not so much that it's all on us as much as our perception is off. Because I can pursue someone as much as I want to, but if you never take the time to pursue me back, then the relationship will never happen, right? Each and all of us on here are married. We had to take the time to pursue them, and they had to be willing for us. They had to be willing to pursue us as well. We can't ignore the importance and the amount of times that God talks about us seeking. And I think that because we talk about seeking so much, we act as though like we're chasing him down or we're trying to find him, when he's very specific about the fact that he's standing at the door knocking. So it's really like, will you answer the call, or will you continue to go in the other direction?
Will you even perceive that he's there at the door?
Yeah.
I think that has to do with mental resistance and mental cloudiness, right? A lot of the times we don't sense God because it's so loud on the inside. It's so chaotic or hectic. So the emotions are so high, or whatever it is that you're dealing with. And so you don't sense God within. I think that's, you know what I mean? We don't always describe it that way, but I think that's really what we're talking about.
And that's what I think the difference is between visualization and vision. Because visualization is us manifesting what we want to see, what we desire. But it says that God will give you the desires of your heart. So the more that I perceive him, the more that I have the vision, not the more that I'm visualizing. I calm down all those thoughts, take every thought captive, right?
And what does it say before that? Because it happens to be sitting in front of me, casting down every imagination.
Exactly.
And every high thing that exalted itself, right?
And it's not just our imagination. It's not just ours. All the things that everybody, the things that society puts on us, of who we're supposed to be, of what we're supposed to be doing, of what we're supposed to have at this age, what we're supposed to be driving at this age, like all of those things, those are the imaginations that are not of him, the desires that are not of him. So if I drop where I visualize I should be, I cancel out all those voices and I actually perceive him in the moment, then he's able to provide the vision.
And more Bible on it. Draw nigh unto me, and I'll draw nigh unto you. Like like Darius mentioned it, and he knows this about me. Y'all may not know this. It was a great song when it was out, but when I tell you, I absolutely can't stand chasing after you. I'm chasing after you, no matter what. I get the sentiment of what they were trying to convey, but to chase means that like it's something I can never really obtain. That it's
Yeah.
like I'm always putting forth this effort, and I'm always like, it's the carrot at the end of the treadmill. Like I'm always trying to get it, always trying to reach it, always trying to obtain it, but never can quite get it. And that's not how God is. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Draw nigh unto me, I'll draw nigh unto you. And it also made me think when Adam and Eve sinned, they heard God walking through in the cool of the day, as they normally do. God called out to them, "Where are you?" Because wait, the way our relationship is like we're front facing, like we're near each other. Adam and Eve hid. God didn't hide. He was walking around like how he usually do, thundering around like how he usually do. But
Thundering
they hid.
around is crazy.
I mean, when you the original language, yada yada yada, that's kind of how it is. But but yeah, he was just shooting his regular, but it was Adam and Eve that hid. But God didn't God didn't go away from them. He was still right there with them. And even in that moment, you still see the grace of God. Maybe a little bit of tangent, but since we're here, the grace of God that Adam and Eve tried to cover themselves with figs, but then God gave them animal skins, given the first sacrifice because of sin. So what should have been their death, let me find these animals, because how else are you going to get animal skin and get covered up with animal skin? Sacrifice those animals to cover up Adam and Eve. So God is so much more full of grace and just come here-ness. I can't think of a better word right now. But like that's how he is. And so yes, it's sometimes easy to feel like, man, God, I'm just doing all this effort and yada yada yada. But it's also there's so much stuff in our way of getting to him. It's like if I were to see my wife in the distance, but like all these chairs and obstacles are in my way. It's not that it's not like my wife's not trying to get to me too if we're trying to meet to one another, but it's like all this other stuff is in the way. So whether it's society, religiosity, you name it, we got to clear out all the way to get to who we need to get to.
So let me add to that just a little bit, right? Because the draw nigh unto you, and I'm at the door knocking. It also speaks to a God effort, right? And so like I love the analogy of like you see your wife off in the distance, but there's a bunch of obstacles in your way. The way I perceive that happening is as soon as your wife sees you moving, she moves as well.
Yeah.
Right. And so like you start moving stuff out of the way and she starts helping. Right. And so like it's not like she's standing still, right? God doesn't stand still as you're moving toward him. When it comes to like quieting those things in your mind, like you'd be surprised how much just a little bit of effort on your end God meets with you with that and starts quieting those voices, right? The biblical story that comes to mind is the story of the forgiving father. You may know it as the story of the prodigal son, right? And what at the end of that story, the father sees the son afar off, right? And all the father needed was to see that there was some effort, and the father comes down, which in that culture, right, like when you're talking about that, like this was not a dignified thing to do for the father at all, right? For the father to like pull up his tunic and start running to his son was an undignified thing to do, but the love dictated that like I need to get to you because I see you making an effort to get to me, right? And I think that like I wanted to make sure that like we put that in because it's vision is all hinged on how you engage with the father, right?
You
And
know
so if
what?
you don't understand how to engage with the Father, and that the Father is willing to engage with you, not just willing, but is making an effort as soon as he see you turn, right? It is important that you understand that before we even move on to like what this vision thing could be, right? Like what these things are that might be in your way. You need to understand that like the Father in heaven loves you so much that as soon as you make an effort, he's making a move too. I just wanted to toss that in there. Just,
Bro, that's so good, because like, as between what you were saying and what Jason said before you, I was just thinking about Adam and Eve in the garden, right? And ultimately, the reason that they went the wrong way was because they didn't have an accurate vision of what type of death God was talking about. God said, you have abundance all around you. All of your needs are met. Everything that you could ever want, think, or imagine, it's all here. When the serpent comes, they're like, look, God said we gonna die. And when the serpent says, no, you're not gonna die, you're gonna see things like God, they thought that they were having the truth revealed, right? Well, the truth is that any separation from God, or any type of you trying to be more like God when you're already like God, is a distorted concept. You were already created in his image. So to see and think and know like God is to now be trying to look at yourself above yourself in a way that has now become prideful or arrogant or feeling like you lack something. No. And I think ultimately a lot of the reasons that we have distorted vision for our lives when we get to the next year is because we start chasing after things outside of God. We are looking for happiness that comes outside of his will. We're looking for acceptance that comes outside of him. We're looking for value or worth or identity from things instead of from his perfect plan for us, right? He's created us perfectly in his image. And I think that those things, they go hand in hand.
And it's a direct reflection of the story of the forgiving father, aka the prodigal son, however you want to look at it. Because in the same way, if we go back to the beginning of that story or that parable, the son felt entitled to everything his father had, and he said, "Give me mine now, and I'll go out and do my own thing." That's the same way that Adam and Eve looked at that tree and were deceived into thinking, okay, this is going to make us like God. Let me take my inheritance now and let me do my own thing. You feel me? And in that reflection, you see, where was I going with that?
Somewhere brilliant.
Oh, when we go back to that being squandered, so the son, he went out and he squandered everything, and I might as well be a servant. You see that same conviction on Adam and Eve when God's calling for them, and we're going to hide ourselves because now we're naked. So coming all the way back to the redemption of those things, it's not that that's what it is, the running, right? So it's not that God never provided in the first place or made an effort in the first place. It was your choice to do what you felt you needed to do to make yourself like him, or whatever it may that separated you from him. So now we get to the point where we're making an effort to get back, and he meets us there. But in the lens of God, he was always there. So when we're talking about like his lens, like when I say his lens is eternal, he saw all of that in one moment. So, and a lot of times from our perception, it seems like he's standing still. But from his perspective, from his lens of eternity, I was always here.
Yeah. I wanted to actually talk about the other son. And the reason why I want to talk about the other son, and Dylan, I just keep hearing you talk. Like at the beginning, you said something to me. You said something to us that that sticks out to me a lot is you talked about those of us that believe, right? And so you can be doing all the things and still not understand who he is and still miss him.
Yeah.
The older son was in the house doing and still didn't understand who he was connected to.
Yeah.
And it can be that way for a lot of us who have come to terms or who have been taught or who believe that because we're doing all the things, that means that I'm aligned with him. Because I'm serving every Sunday, every Wednesday, every time the church is open, like I'm doing these things can mean I'm connected to him, right? Like, and the other thing that I think about is like the Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing a lot of things and still missed him when
and
he was
knowing
face
a
to
lot of
face.
things.
And knowing, yeah, and still missed him when he was right there. And so I think it's important for us to understand that too, because that relationship, to keep it on par, that relationship is necessary to fully understand the vision of the house or the vision of the father, right? You can be in the house and not even understand the vision of what's going on. He didn't understand why his brother was being celebrated. He didn't understand why he didn't have things. And he's basically like, we could have been like, what are you talking about? You know, like everything I have is yours. But because of your lack of understanding in our relationship, in that specific instance, you're missing it. And so one of the things that I just wanted to touch on as we move forward is the importance of like, you can be doing and knowing and be disconnected.
You know, I'm sorry, I just want to jump in real quick. I promise it'll be fast. The Pharisees got so caught up in the ink that they missed the word. That's a lack of imagination.
So caught up in the ink that they missed the word.
They were so into the practical and the logical of the scriptures that they missed the heart of the scriptures. They missed the movement and the grace and the spirit of the scriptures. So when the scripture stood right in front of them, they couldn't see him.
Because also, like, another thing, like one thing I've been thinking about with all this is how we know we call God Yahweh Abba Father, but Abba doesn't just, like, Abba means the source. So God's not just a source, he is the source. So as we talk about like getting a vision from God and everything, to even going back up to the question above, as far as like, how do you line up your imagination to that of God's will for your life? I don't think you line up your imagination. I think you submit your imagination and then allow Abba to give you the imagination, so that now when you're connected, when you're abiding, when he is the source, you can then trust your imagination. Going back to what we even mentioned earlier, like, how do you get that vision from God? Well, what's your source? What's your source for the vision? Did you envision racks on racks because that's what you saw on TV?
Right.
Or like where did that come from? Like, okay, cool, you want the bag, I want you to have the bag, but what's the source of that?
Right.
And so we need to make sure that the source of your vision came from Abba, the source. And then when that happens too, you can rest in that, because like we always talk about provision, right? And a lot of times it's provision of resources, but God can also provide vision. And the way God works, if he sees, he provides. Like, if he sees a need, if he sees something going on, then he has to provide. Like, because I don't think he'd be a good father if he didn't. Like for example, my son has been a little under the weather over the past couple of days. He's been coughing, he's been all boogery and whatnot. I see it. So if I don't provide some relief to him, I'm not really being a good father right now. So I'm like, okay, you're all boogery, you can't really blow your nose. I got to get this little nasty nose Frida and suck out your boogers. It's gross, but it's effective. And and it's what you need because I see there's a need. So because I see it, I can't turn a blind eye to it. I'm your father. I love you. I have to do something. I have to step in. Israel, I've been seeing you cry. I've been seeing and hearing your cries for 400 years. I have to do something. I got my son Moses on the way. He's going to take care of you. I see it happening. I have to do something. I see that you're trying to cover your own self with figs. That ain't going to get it. Now I have to do something. I see that you deceived my kids. Now I'm going to have to deal with you before I deal with them. That's just the way God works. I have to provide. Like, that's what makes him a good father. And so I think even when it comes to vision, he will provide the vision, but he has to be Abba. You have to let him be Abba in your vision.
Bishop Paramore said something on Sunday that everybody wants a savior, but nobody wants a Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Everybody wants the salvation and the stuff, but right, we don't want to submit to his will, right? We don't want to submit to his way. We kind of still want to do our own thing, right?
Yeah.
The reason that I bring that up is because, like, I'm gonna talk about me for a second. Like, Pastor Dylan is a new human, right? Like this idea of like pastoring was not something that I wanted to do, right? Like I thought that, like, you know, a lot of this was like deep and spooky. It didn't take all that, wasn't all that necessary, right? Like, and I kind of want to bring it into like real, like not real, like we haven't been talking about real life, but we have, you know what I'm saying? Like my struggle with intimacy with God, right, was reflective in my struggle with intimacy with other people around me. And it was based in a space of trust. And so like we're talking about this, but like there are very real reasons why like people have walked away from the church and still trying to like connect with God. There's a reason why like there are people who are watching us right now who haven't stepped into church in years, right? Which is fine. Like I'm not trying to bash anybody for it because I was that, right? Like I would be in a church and not be in a church, right? I'm sitting in the pew picking apart the sermon. I'm that guy, right? Like not into the worship, just looking for all of the things that might be a mistake, right? Like, and how that affects what I'm thinking about God. Like, I don't know, because of the things that I have experienced in my life, like what you said about your son, Jason, and that's beautiful. I'm not trying to take anything away from that, right? But because of the things that have happened in my life, it's sometimes hard to believe that he will show up because I haven't seen him show up or I haven't recognized his hand of favor on it, right? Like I don't perceive that, right? Like what happened in my life made me trust God less. You know what I'm saying? Like it felt a lot like if nobody else was coming, it was going to be on me, right? Like things are falling apart around me consistently, right? And like, that's how you lead, like it get led into a very dark place. And I've been in some very dark places, right? So when you talk about like vision in this God that you're describing, and it's like, yeah, like I hear that and that sounds beautiful. I want to experience that, but like I can't see that, right? Like I don't, help me, right? Like that's what I'm saying. Like maybe that's what this is about. Like help me get to a place where I can like trust God. Like help my unbelief, because like I'm struggling with that right now because the way that my life has been set up, there was a vision that I had for my life that I believe that God gave me, and that looks really far away right now. That looks like something that is unattainable, right, for me. And because it's so unattainable, it's hard for me to conceptualize that this God that I care about, because my heart is broke and it feels like God broke it. Because if I put it all on the line to chase after this one thing, that he showed me was a thing, like that I feel like he showed me was a thing that I've had since the youth, right? Like, what am I supposed to do with that pain? How do I get past that pain to be even in a relationship with him, to even get a new vision for my life, right? Like, that's where I'm at. Help me, right? Like, people have died around me who I thought was going to be with me. People have like turned on me. There are broken relationships. Like, I'm 30 plus, and like I'm losing people who like I thought I needed to get to that next place. Like, what do you have to say to that? Like, help me with that.
I would love to jump in by starting by saying I relate, right? Because I said something this morning to someone. I said, I'm tired of being the person who has all the potential, who is not quite sure if he's ever going to realize it. And when I talk about the internal grapple on the inside of me, it's having the ability to see myself coming out on the other side of a thing and being able to see myself coming out on top in my family because I know what God has showed me. And at the exact same time, seeing some of the scenes from my past play out that then become projected into my future, and I watch myself also fumble and falter and fall apart in my future, and I can almost see two different imaginations.
Yeah.
And so there's these moments where people talk about faith and belief, but what Sean Korey said earlier was 100%, because faith and belief may not always be in God. Your faith and belief can be rooted in the wrong things. And so I think that one of the questions that we always have to go back to, we talked about it in this group before, we have to talk about it again, is God good? And then if God is good, does God fulfill his promises? Is he true to his word? Is what God says valid or not? Because everything goes back to those questions. If God is not good, and he is a man that he should lie, and he's not someone who finishes everything that he starts, then you're in trouble, and things in the end are probably going to be just what you're worried, right? If God, however, is somebody who will fulfill his promises, and I can put my trust in him, which is necessary, then what happens is if I can begin to surrender, which is a hard thing to do, surrender my mind, surrender my actions, surrender my surroundings, surrender what I think I need to fulfill the journey, the more I surrender those things, I give God the ability to make all things work together for my good.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like it's a surrendered stance. I can see the good happening. I can see the bad happening. I surrender it all and say, God, have your way in the midst of it. That's a spiritual answer, but it's also very practical. One thing at a time, saying, every time I put my hands on it, I'm distorting this thing myself because I'm trying to make it look like what I think it's supposed to look like. What if I thought those people were supposed to be there, but their absence will make me grow? What if I think that situation is supposed to be perfect, but its imperfection is what perfects me? Right? Sometimes it's the things that aren't there that make what needs to show up there on the inside of me happen. And God knows that. And that's what I remind myself of. That's what Maurice says to Maurice when Maurice is tripped up.
Because of right quick, I see you, Sean Korey. Though it's God's vision, he created the blueprint. He's the architect. That really is tough because it feels like, all right, God, you gave me the vision, and where we mess up is like, okay, God, you gave me the vision, so let me go and do the vision. But it's God's plan. He has to interpret the vision. For I know the plans I have for you. It's not. That's what he said to Jeremiah. He didn't say, for you know the plans I have for you. You don't know them, Jeremiah, even though he did explain, whatever. We're not getting fully into that. But ultimately, I guess I say that to say that, like, it's so easy.
I think you froze.
That was the worst.
Yeah.
Oh no. Okay.
Oh,
Am I back?
not the kitty cat.
Yeah.
The kitty.
Okay. Meow. I'm back. All right. So like, all right, God, this is your vision and your vision that you gave me. But like, but I even though we have a part to play, it can't be our effort at the same time too. And this is a hard concept. And so let me explain it this way. I was talking with a big bro of mine, and I was just kind of word vomiting. I was just like, "Hey, bro, this is what I feel like I need to be doing, but should I be doing this? I don't know if any of this makes sense. I'm thinking about this. I feel like I need to do this, that, and that, and yada yada yada. And I feel like God wants to use me this way, but I'm thinking about doing this. I don't know. Like, am I crazy? Am I making sense?" And he was like, "Hey, everything you're saying is cool." He's like, "But if this is God's plan, like this is God's plan for your life, it's not up for you to make it happen. It's just up for you to say. It's not up for you to make it happen. It's just up for you to say yes." Abram didn't know how to become a father of many nations. That wasn't up to him to figure out how to make that happen. He just had to say yes. God gave him an offer. He just had to say yes. And so when it comes with us, we get God visions. We get things from him. But a lot of times we try to interpret what he's given us instead of really allowing him to enact it and just keep giving the yes and allow him to make the path straight. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, lean not to your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll make the path straight. And not to say that we don't consider God, but I think when we catch something, we want to go and act on it. I know, at least I do. I'll at least speak for me. When I feel like I see something from God and I see like, okay, God, this is what you want me to do. All right, then like let's go do it. But what I'm learning is God needs less of my zeal to go do it and just more of my yes and submission. And I don't know if that's really hidden or landing, to be honest, because it's a hard thing. It's because it's like there is effort to do, there is stuff you need to do. Faith without works is dead, yes. And at the same time, like I can't work more. I can't like overwork my faith, if that makes sense. Like I can't like keep going like working. Like I have to stay in his path, his stride, his grace and everything. Yeah. I don't know if that's landing. But I'm really like trying my best. At least that's kind of like where I've trying to been at and trying to like understand it all, realizing that, okay, God, if this is your plan, really giving it back to you, you're gonna have to do it. So you're gonna have to tell me what to do. I'm slow of speech. What you want me to say to this man? All right, go tell him, blah, blah, blah. Like God gave him the plans and the steps. A lot of times when we see the stories in the Bible, God is giving the plans and the steps. So I don't know.
No, I'm with you. Go ahead.
I think God is. This is gonna sound wild. It's gonna sound wild. I'm just precursor.
Why they pay you the big bucks?
God is not concerned with being good. God is truth. That's what he's concerned with being, is truth. All truth. God is not concerned with being good. There's things that God has to do that in our perception don't seem good. He sent plagues on Egypt. Those plagues did not only affect the Egyptians. He's not concerned with being good. He's concerned with being truth. So a lot of times we have to understand that when we're going through tests and trials, that is a part of his plan, is a part of truth. because he's not concerned with being good. He told us not to even eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because we were supposed to perceive truth, not good and evil.
Stepping on some toes there, brother. Stepping on some toes. All right. Give me a little more because I'm here for the ride. You know what I mean? My interest has been piqued. Help me understand. Bring me to where you at.
So truth is, in the vision that God gave me, right, of where I'm supposed to be, he told me I'm supposed to be a homeowner. What he didn't tell me is I was going to have to stay in an apartment for 10 years before I became a homeowner. So if I'm perceiving him as good or trying to perceive him as good, and he promised me a home, but year after year, my rent keeps on raising and I'm still in this apartment, that doesn't seem good. But the truth is still evident that he wants me to be a homeowner. And now I'm moving into that truth. The whole time he was truth, but I perceived it as evil and not according to his plan because for 10 years I was stuck in this apartment. But it was all a part of his plan, his truth for me to be a homeowner. A lot of times we take prophecy and we think it's for the here and now. It's immediate. I got a prophecy. It has to be fulfilled now. Will you ride the journey of truth?
So let me I think I understand where you're coming from with that. But does that mean that he's unconcerned with being good or that he is good and you don't understand what good is? Right? Like, is it more me not understanding good?
He's not concerned with our version of good.
That's
because
fair.
he told us not to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
That's fair. I'm with you on that. I can ride all the way. I can ride all the way there with that.
So if I may,
being concerned with my version of good, yeah, I'm riding with you on that one.
if I may, tag me and Korey.
Go ahead.
So I think where we make the mistake is that we deem uncomfortable as bad because we want it a certain way. If all things are working together for the good, right? And if God is strategic about what he's doing, it does not mean that you have to be comfortable for it to be good. We deem good and bad based off of our comfort levels. That's what we deem good and bad, based off of how our feelings are affected by it. Joseph, Old Testament Joseph, wasn't comfortable. You can't convince me that Abram was totally comfortable. Leave everything you know and go. One of the people who we revere as one of the most amazing prophets in Daniel was a slave, and we never talk about that.
Facts.
So the reality is that what is necessary for the greater good may cause you to be uncomfortable and may cause you to have to go through some stuff. And what is really promised is that in this life, we will have trouble. It rains on the just and the unjust.
Yeah.
The problem is we don't want the rain and we don't want the problems. So we believe because we believe we're exempt from everything else. But there is no story from Genesis to Revelation and nothing that we read where there wasn't a continuous ebb and flow.
Yeah.
Daniel was obedient obedient, one of the most obedient people we've seen, and he still ended up in a lion's den.
Job was the most righteous man.
And his name came up.
What you meant for evil, God
so
turn for good.
Bro. And so a lot of it, even going back to what Korey said this earlier, when he was talking about the desires of our heart, right? And we had touched on this a little bit last week when we were talking about we got to read the whole thing. Like a lot of the times you think that your desires that you're going to get is apart from God. You get the desires when you're connected and your heart begins to align with his heart. It's not apart from him you get your desires. We act as though apart from him, all my desires are good.
Apart from him, you can do nothing.
And it's foolishness.
John 15.
It's foolishness. Like, so I think that the problem is we have to really there's several things we have to understand. We have to understand that our obedience matters and other people's obedience matters. We have to choose life. Adam and Eve had a choice. The rich young ruler had a choice. Like Jonah had a choice. Jonah had such a choice to the point where he fought the whole situation. And then at the end of it was still upset with God. And we never hear about him again. Like we have choices.
Yeah.
And our choices affect things, but we act like they don't. The children, we read the story as though, like when we think about Exodus, right? We read the story because we see the Israelites going to the promised land. We looked at it as though there was no alteration. God wanted the people who he freed from the beginning to enter, but they chose not to.
Yes.
They made a choice. And we act like our choices don't matter. Like our choices affect everything. And so even when it comes to everything that we're talking about, like we have to make the choices to spend the time. We have to make the choices to do the things, because if not, you want a particular outcome, but we want it a certain way, not realizing that it doesn't just come the way that we want it. Like I have been studying Joseph and Daniel, like parallel. And the thing that's amazing is that both of them endured slavery and was in purpose throughout the entire time. We never see where Joseph wasn't in purpose. We make assumption and we use strain eisegesis to prove points about Joseph, but we never see where God was like, he should have never told his brothers and them, because the reality is he was sold into slavery, and it said, and the presence of God was with him, which means that God's hand was on him in the midst of it. So we can make certain statements, but it's like he had to go where he went. And we don't see the overarching picture, right? Like Joseph learned the culture of what it meant to be next to the king from being a slave. Joseph was a Hebrew. Joseph didn't grow up in Egypt. But we don't like the vehicle that took him to Egypt. And that's the problem. So we preach against the vehicle as though God didn't use the vehicle in order to get him there. Because this is the reality too. Like if it wasn't a God thing, God would have intervened like we've seen him do so many other times.
Right.
Oh, there's a lot there. There's a whole lot there, because I want to. There's a couple of things that I want to address, right? One being, is it okay that I want God to be concerned with my version of good, even if that means him changing my version of good? I think that it's important for me to see God as good. And so the only one that can like make that so is in my relationship with him. Like we've talked a lot about abiding, right? And there's a change that happens to my heart in the abiding, right? Like me and you have deep relationship. All of you have deep relationship because we've spent time, but there's some things, some ideas about you that I wouldn't have understood and couldn't have seen you as good if I had found out but didn't know you. And so there was an effort made. Like, I think that it's okay for God to be, I think that like the hang up is the word like concern, right? Like that's probably the major hang up there. But I think that like it's I need, like, I've experienced God allowing me to not think he's good for a particular amount of time, but then the focus shifted to like, no, like I don't need an obedient slave. I want an obedient son. And the difference between that is how you view me. Right. And so like I think that it was necessary for God to like spend some time loving me so that I could see God as good, or at least give God the benefit of the doubt when I'm unsure about it. Right. And I think that like using even Jesus as an understanding of that, right? Because like we live in the dispensation of Holy Spirit. So like this is after Jesus, like understanding that like Jesus needed to come in our relationship with Christ, like Holy Spirit was necessary, because like it's not just about doing what's right, but it's also about seeing what's right and seeing it correctly. Because
But then,
like, go
here
ahead.
you're talking about truth. We're not, we get out of perception and we get to truth. He's not concerned with you with being good, because he's concerned with you walking into truth. And the truth is he's good no matter whether you think he is or not.
And I think that like that's fair, and I agree with that. I need relationship to get there though.
Exactly.
You need
But
Right,
he
like,
maturity.
doesn't.
You need
He doesn't.
maturity to get there.
Yeah, and
Right?
he allows us.
That's my maturation.
Yeah.
Well, and I just wanted to say this: maturity. This all goes back to the beginning of the conversation. If Sean Corey's answer at the beginning had to do with perception, right? Vision and perception going hand in hand. So if I don't perceive God to be good, that doesn't mean God is not good. It means I have a skewed or messed up perception of what's really happening. And so I think that God being good is the same principle as God being true. Oh, he's always good, but it may not seem like it. We may not be able to perceive it. And the question in the midst of the turmoil is, though he slay me, yet will I trust him? Right? Well, will you trust him in the midst of the misery and the pain? That even the misery and the pain is for you, right? Like that if anything is going to ultimately lift up his plans and his efforts and his thoughts, and then in the end it will turn out good, but we may not understand what that even means. I mean, I think I've been praying so much about what God can do in 2024 for my family when it comes to ministry and business and changing people's lives and human purpose and all these things, right? Well, ultimately, for me to save the people and help the people and speak life to the people and lay the hands on the people, and all the things that I feel called to do, it will require pain. And in some of the midst of some of that pain, I may question if God is good. And there has to be a maturity to know, even if I can't see it, He always is. And He always has my best interest in mind as a father. At the end of the day, I'm a kingdom citizen, and the king has the best interest in mind of his citizens. I'm his son, and the father has the best interest in mind of his children. So there has to be that maturity, and maturity, as you said, comes from relationship, comes from experience, comes from learning his nature and his character over time.
And I just wanted to add that, like, all throughout scripture, bro, people question God. People who have a relationship with him question him. He doesn't punish them for questioning him. So, like, even what you're talking about as far as like our relationships, it came from questions, though. We get to know each other based off of the questions that we ask. Sometimes that's a part of us knowing each other. So I can know you all and know the heart of a matter based off of the questions that I'm asking. And so that's how I can know whether or not when Dylan was seen doing whatever, or Jason was seen whatever, or Maurice or Korey, I know based off of our relationship and the questions and the conversations we had that if it's something crazy, something had to pop off.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they made this move, I know why they made the move, but it only comes with relationship. But I think the biggest thing for me, man, as I've kind of journeyed, is that like that I firmly believe that like we believe that like I believe that comfort is one of our biggest enemies, first and foremost. That comfort is one of, like, you want to know what's crazy, y'all? All the stories that we read, there was constant change, and yet we fight tooth and nail against it all the time. We are always fighting change as though like change isn't a part of our lives. And I honestly will say that I believe is culturally based off of what our ancestors have been through.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about like generational stuff, right? So I'm not even talking about like slavery. I'm talking about like, let's look at the Great Depression
Mm-hmm.
and the things that happened in the Great Depression, which turned a lot of people into hoarders.
Mm-hmm.
And turned a lot of people into certain. So now there's certain stuff, like I think about this, we are so committed to certain comforts that we won't move when God tells us to move because we don't like how, like, we're not concerned about his greater purpose. We're concerned about our comfort. If I can tell you, and y'all know me, if I was concerned about comfort, like, I think that we believe that the journey is supposed to be comfortable, and we don't do enough of educating people on the fact that like it's not comfortable, right? Like even when it comes to healing, right? And I think about like we talk, like all of us have talked about healing in some way, shape, or form, and we talk about doing the work. The work is not easy to do. You just have to be willing to push through it because you know on the other side of it is something greater. Like I've personally never broken a bone, but I have had my finger split open. Like to the point where it was like a hot dog.
Mm-hmm.
Graphic.
And so the stitches, it hurt like crazy when they had to clean it out. And then they had to put stitches in it. And then all this stuff, I had a time that I had to go through before, but you can't tell right now by looking at my hand that anything ever happened. But there was a process that I had to go through before getting there. And so many times we want to fight the process. Like Jason, your example earlier, and Ashley touched on it because I've used the freedom. Like the problem is you're fighting against the very thing that will help you achieve what it is that you're trying to get. It'll give you the clarity that you need, literally.
Yeah.
But the problem is you're fighting me tooth and nail. And I know as your parent that this is what's good for you, even though it's not your choice and it's uncomfortable. And the longer you fight, the more uncomfortable it is. And then there's other additional stuff that's added to it, right? Because now you go from being stopped up to you sweating, and now you crying, and it's all this extra stuff because you won't submit to the process of what it takes to clean you out.
Okay, I'm with you, and of course I gotta be the one. Like I'm pushing because of who may be watching, so that the five of us are clear, right? Like,
oh, it's already understood.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not disagreeing.
We already knew that.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I need you to explain to me the difference between like my comfort and my joy or my happiness, right? Like, does God care about my happiness? Does he care about my joy? Like, does he care that I might enjoy life, right? Like, or is the what I'm supposed to be doing so uncomfortable that like joy isn't part of the scenario, right? Like God is unconcerned with it, right? And so like the reason that I'm asking is because like you're making a solid point and there's a very solid argument, but I also believe that like Christians are addicted to pain, right? In that like if it's not painful, then I'm not necessarily next to God, right? And so like if I'm not in tragedy, then I'm not in God's will, right? If I'm not like struggling, then I'm not in God's will. And so like I need y'all to help me clean that up so that I can
So
maybe it don't take cleaning up. Maybe it's
I
not
just
about
want to
cleaning
make
it
one
up, right?
statement.
Like I'm trying to understand. Help me
I just
understand.
want to make one statement, and then I'm gonna let Korey and Jason go after it, right? Like, all I want to say is this: is that a fruit of the spirit is joy.
No arguments.
So it's a part of who he is. So to assume that joy comes without God doesn't make sense. That means that your teaching or your reading is in error.
So then help me understand where my error is, right? Because like what I'm hearing and what I've heard, right, is that like comfort is a big deal. And like I agree with that, right? Like if I'm an athlete, anytime like in my career, like I have to go through things, right? And if I get comfortable, I get stagnant. I got that. But there's a level of like, don't I want to provide some comfort to my family? Right?
So D,
Like help
this
me.
is where
Comfort and
my
contentment are two different things.
yeah, and
Well, talk to me. That's what I'm
this
asking.
is where
Talk to
my
me.
issue is, right? Is because like this is why I said what I said. Then you have to do reflection on where you are, because if we're reading, it isn't all doom and gloom. But if all you're highlighting when you're reading is the doom and gloom, that's an internal issue that needs to be dealt with, because there's something in you that is attracted to the doom and gloom,
Mhm.
because we're specifically talking about we're specifically talking about a thing, right? So if we're specifically talking about something, then we're not talking about joy right now. So if we were talking about joy, then that would be a different focus. But what I'm looking at is like, what about our conversation for whoever would automatically take you to that, and then that's a deeper rooted issue. Because if you out of this whole thing, what you got is I'm a suffer, and none of us said that you were going to suffer. Nobody on here was like, oh, you're going to suffer. We just said that there will be trouble. Not your life will be trouble. Not everything you do will be full of pain. That there will be trouble. And so for me, when I look at it from that perspective, I'm saying that like that's a deeper rooted issue from my perspective of what we got going on, because that highlights it highlights something deeper.
Mhm.
I've
And maybe that's
man,
what this question is getting to. And I want you to jump back in,
yeah.
Jason. But like, how do you deal with the guilt when you backslide, fall off track, right? Like so go for it. Go for it.
So when I say this stems from teaching that most, if not all of us got. And I believe it's true. I haven't done any study on it on myself. So I'll also make that disclaimer too. But if you're feeling guilt, I would bet that's not God. God's not in the business of making you feel guilty, because guilty means, like, for me, when I hear guilty, I take on the shame of my wrongdoing. But therefore, those that are in Christ, there is no condemnation. So God's not trying to shame you when you get off track. It's a thing of like it. I think it goes back to a perception thing. It like, are you gonna feel it? Yeah. Like, if you get off track with God and everything, you're gonna feel it, and that's natural to feel. But if you can't let it linger, you have to return to God. And one thing that me and Darius always like talk about, like when we bring up David, and especially when we compare like David to Solomon, because David was way more foul than Solomon ever was on his worst day. Like, as far as like what the Bible says, or like what the Bible recorded and everything like that. But the difference was, no matter what, David always went back to God. So, we need to do that, abiding, going back to him when you backslide, when you fall off track, going back to him, instead of trying to hide and sew on your own fig leaves. So I think when you try to sew on your own fig leaves, talking about Adam and Eve, when you try to like handle your wrongdoing yourself, that's when you feel guilty, and that creates distance. Not that God is pushing you away, but you're like, all right, God, you're there, I'm not cool, so I'm just gonna get out of the frame. And it's like, no, that's not it. Come to him and let him fix it. In the same way, a little kid, if they knock over something, you tell them like, okay, come to me because I can fix it, I can make it better. So it's really, I want to say it's almost like a focus thing of like I don't want you to see it as guilty. Like, I don't want you to see yourself as guilty, because Jesus in the cross already solved that. You're not guilty. Like, he took that on for you. But rather, when you get off track, let it just be that, an indication that, oh, I'm off track. Let me get back on track. Let me get back into that secret place, that place of abiding with God.
And that's an indicator of spirit versus soul, right? Because our soul is very sin conscious. It's very conscious of the things that we do, and it's tied to our emotions. Guilt is an emotion. So the sin consciousness in our soul makes us feel guilty for the things that we do. And that lets us know that we're doing things out of our own effort when trying to pursue truth. Whereas in the spirit, there's a conviction. Conviction is different than guilt, because conviction lets you know, okay, I fell short. But there's a calibration that I have to get back to that allows me to actually walk in truth. So that conviction is an indicator. Come back over here. Where consciousness, the sin consciousness, wants you to dwell on that thing and be in your soul on that thing. And then even going back to the joy versus pain, we chose that. We as humanity chose that. When Adam and Eve decided to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we chose to experience joy and pain, because you can't know good without evil. You can't know joy without pain. We chose this.
And also with that, again, I put everything back to like my relationship with my son, right? If there's any reason I'm making him feel any discomfort, it's with the intent to give him comfort or to give him joy. I'm sucking out the boogers so that you can breathe and do what you want to do and everything like that. Like, I'm not trying to purposely afflict you just because I'm just some big mean old daddy. No, if the discomfort of going through like the nasal aspirator and holding you down and everything like that is because I want you living a full boogerless life. So that's in the same way, the discomfort that God may allow happen in your life is on the path to joy. It's on the path to good, because we know that all things work together for the good. It doesn't say all things work together for the suffering of those who love God and who are called according to his purpose. There is good. There is joy out of it because God is good. God is joy, and the joy of the Lord is our strength. You can't, like, it's God's joy that he gives to you. That's why it's the joy of the Lord. Who owns the joy? God owns the joy. Abide in him, you get the joy. Abide in yourself, you might miss it. So it all goes back to a place of really being in him and being in the secret abiding place with him. Because if he's come that we may have life, and life to the fullest, or life more abundantly, it's not really alluding to more abundant pain or more abundant suffering or anything. Like, is a full, like, I don't think God is promising us a full life of pain. Pain will happen, some discomforts will happen, but ultimately it's to be of joy and for it to be our enjoyment. Eden, the Garden of Eden, wasn't a place of suffering. Like, he created a perfect world, a perfect place for their enjoyment, to
Well,
enjoy.
I will add this though, because it's important for us to acknowledge there was evil in the garden, right? So the tree of good and evil did not bring evil into the world. It made man begin to hyper focus on the evil and begin to even relate to and be drawn close to the evil. But the evil was already there. And so I think that it's like that's really important for us to comprehend that when you are walking a journey with watching the disciples with Jesus, you see some painful moments, but every painful moment is something to grow them or help them learn or help them ultimately become who they're meant to become, right? And I think that when we're off center and off focus, the pain just produces more pain, right? Like it just multiplies more pain instead of multiplying growth. Anytime that I start to hurt and I turn away from the hurt, lean away from the hurt, run away from the hurt, then the hurt haunts me and hurts me further and deeper and creates a whole bunch of other stuff. Because ultimately now I'm running from God and truth. The moment that I turn and face the pain might be real pain. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
some processes in my own life in the last couple of years. I've cried more tears in the last 2 years than I have in the last 35. But there's these moments that I've had whenever we're just Christmas and sitting on Christmas morning, eating cinnamon rolls with my family and like wearing matching pajamas, and feeling a sense of joy and understanding that that's the fruit from the painful growth. There's more pain in some of the moments I'm having. There's more purpose. There's more power and intention. There's more of so many things that I'm experiencing because I've chosen to walk through the pain and not let the pain define the season. The pain is not the definer of the season. God's grace is. God's goodness is. The fact that I have a baby that can walk in and come and lay on my chest, and my wife sitting in the next room. Some of our hardest conversations that we've had in the last couple of years have produced the best fruit. And so I think that again that is perception. People perish for lack of wisdom, for lack of vision, right? So if I don't allow God to really show me what's really happening, then relationships die. If I don't let God show what's really happening, parts of me die. And so I think that has been the real journey, and it's not an easy one, but it's the journey of God show me the truth. God show me what's really going on. God show me beyond my perception, show me yours. Beyond my conviction, show me yours. Beyond my understanding, show me yours.
Yeah. And I just think that, like, man, one of the things too is like there's always there's always going to be processing, right? But that don't mean you don't get to enjoy it at the
Right.
same time. Like it's not like we look at like we've been talking about David. And if you look at the journey of David, even when you just think about Psalms, right? And we look at the variety of emotions that is in there. Like there were joyous times, there were sad times. He was angry. It was all the things. We have emotions for a reason. Like I don't think we should detach from our emotions. God showed all of the emotions that we're speaking about throughout scripture as well. I just think that what ends up happening is I like what Maurice said, like it's a hyper focus.
Mhm.
And when we hyper focus on certain stuff, then that's all we'll ever see. Like, and sometimes what it is too is it's environment. Like sometimes God shifts our environment because we can't be productive the way we need to be productive in the current environment that we're in. So things have to be shaken up. Like Abram couldn't have stayed in the environment he was in and became Abraham
Yeah.
because of everything that was attached to that environment. Joseph couldn't have became who he was supposed to be if he would have just stayed with his brothers. He would have
What he
never
envisioned.
but he would have never gotten to that place in that space. And so I think that is also a major key is like, hey, there's and sometimes we don't realize that the pain is for a joyous moment,
Right.
right? The birth is painful. The child is joyous.
Mhm.
David, one of the things that I heard somebody teach this, I'd never seen it before. So remember when in scripture when David and the warriors they're out at war and then they come and they kidnap everybody and then like destroy the whole area and then they have to go back and get them back, right? And
Mhm.
they're all in shambles. Well, at that same time, what a lot of people don't talk about is he had an area for him to rule over until it was his time to reign. If that area doesn't get crumbled, then he doesn't take his rightful position as the king. And that same time frame is also when Saul died.
Mm.
So something had to be destroyed in order for him to embrace the promise that he was getting ready to walk into. Because without it, sometimes you're not going to leave where you are because everything is a certain way. And so sometimes the disruption happens because there's more. Like we're in a good place, we're comfortable, but then there's more. Like it's a continuous, like God is a God of multiplication, not subtraction, not division, not addition, but multiplication.
And one of the things that Solomon, David's son, had going for him when he has his encounter with God, his request is ultimately for proper vision.
Mhm.
He says, I need to rule the people that you've given me in the way that you see fit. Help me to see it. Help me to comprehend it. Help me to understand the way to go. Help me to have the skill to accomplish the thing, right? And so I think that there's such a lesson to learn in that. And that when we're praying for vision for a new year or praying for vision for the next season coming out of a hard time or whatever it might be, what we're really asking for is for the vision of what it is that we need to become in order to steward what we're meant to steward in that season. Can you give me a vision for the man I need to be the husband that I need to be?
Boy.
Can you give me the understanding of the man that I need to become to be the husband, the father, the business owner? Can you give me the vision? And in the midst of that vision, there may be some turmoil because I may have to face some things to grow up, but ultimately, that is the definition of joy because God is saying yes to your growth. He said, "Be fruitful and multiply." So even if something dies on the inside of me, there should be some seeds that end up in the ground that produces the thing that comes out of the ground in the end later on. Like there should always be growth because I should always be multiplying in good things. That's joyous.
Yeah. And even in uncomfortable positions, joy can come, right? So I'm going back to Daniel, right? And I think about Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, right? So we also know
Yes.
them as Shadrach,
Yes, sir.
Meshach, and Abednego,
Yes,
right?
sir.
But the reality is that we meet them going into captivity. And we see them going into an area where they're now slaves, and because of their obedience to God, even though they're slaves, they find favor in an unfavorable situation. And so now they have access to things that other slaves don't have access to. And they have different comfort levels inside of this place because of where they are and because of the favor of God on their life in the midst of it. Right. Then I think about how what we don't talk about as well as the importance of them being together and unified, because when the king has the dream and he sends out the decree for everybody, all of them to be killed, Daniel finds out and goes back to them and says, let's seek the Lord for mercy. And them coming together and seek the Lord is what then he's given a vision and a dream that shows what everything was about. And because of the vision and the dream that God revealed to him and that God gave him, then they're made rulers to a certain extent underneath this kingdom. And what's crazy is he elevates Daniel, and Daniel says, well, it's not just like, if you're going to elevate me, then I need them to be elevated as well. And then because of that, now all of them are elevated inside of this kingdom while being slaves, very similar to how we see Joseph. And so even in the uncomfortability of it all, like there can be favor on you in the midst of things that aren't ideal, that can allow you to be in a space, in a place that everybody else isn't in, based off of your connection to him.
That's good.
And so,
okay, you still go ahead.
I just want to I wanted to touch on this. So like, I think with to seal this for Brian is like, bro, all you just keep returning to the Father. Like we talked about the prodigal son or the forgiving father, right? Is what we talked as Dylan like positioned it to be. And so I think that that's the greatest way to look at it for tonight, is to look at that and understand it. Like, in the midst of all the stuff that he did and all the stuff that he was doing, there was still a forgiving father waiting for him to return when he didn't even feel like he deserved it.
Yeah.
When he didn't feel like he was supposed to be a certain way. And what the thing that is amazing about that is he came back and was received as a son, not as a slave. Because he went back with the mentality to be a slave. Yeah. But the father was like, no, you're a son.
All right, guys. We are well into overtime. Knocking on 2 hours door. And I think it was all good. It was all necessary. Do you have any wrap-up thoughts that you want to give to the people before we sign off?
I just gave mine.
And it's appreciated.
Brian, I would just say, just know that God gets it. Like he knows how hard the journey is, and he knows who we are, and that is meant to be, number one, a comforting thing, because he's never caught off guard. But number two, he knows who we really are, and you're not defined by your worst moments. You're not defined by the time that you mess up. That's what the enemy wants you to think. You're defined by his love for you and who he knows that you really are at the core. Somebody who was created in his image. He knows your real character. So just allow yourself to walk boldly to his throne, to not be timid there, but to go to him knowing he's a loving father. He's a good king. He loves his people, and he loves you.
Amen.
I would say I feel like God is way less concerned with sin than we be. And I say that because, woman, where are your condemners? Oh, none of them condemn you? Well, neither do I. Now go and sin no more. So while there would be people and even yourself so concerned with the wrong that you've done or how you've missed the mark, God is not tripping on that nearly as much as we think he is. And we've talked about the forgiving Father again and again tonight as well. Even when you look at Adam and Eve, the wrong happens. It sucks. You're going to feel it. Cool. And that's not your place of abiding. God is. So always just go back to a loving Father whose first fault is always to restore and to cover.
Mhm.
Jesus. Because even again with Adam and Eve, he covered them.
Yeah.
In the time that they were trying to cover themselves, he's like, your covering doesn't work. I got the covering that you need. Here's some animal skins. So with that being said, you feel what you feel, and what you feel is real. And it's not fun to feel wrong or to feel like you missed the mark. Like us being wrong actually is like, it's like the equivalent of physical pain, like in the mind, like literally like the same kind of like chemical reaction when you like get hit or experience physical pain. It's the same kind of pain you feel when you're wrong about something. So you're gonna feel it. That's cool. Now you get to choose where you're gonna abide. Are you gonna abide in the feelings and man, messed it up again? Yeah, God, dog, I just can't. Like, is that gonna be your place of abiding, or is your place of abiding gonna be, no, my dad is one that restores and that loves, and that loves me far beyond I could ever think or imagine. Because then I even bring up David, and I'll close here too, that before we read David's story, God knew David's story. And yet and still, in his grace and love for David, the first thing we learn about him is this cat vibes with me. He's a man after my own heart. The Bible could have led with David, the one who sinned way more than Saul. David, the raping, murderous conniver of men. But no, it was a man after my own heart. He gets me. He vibes with me. He abides in me. So abide in him.
Our special guest, Sean Korey. You got anything to lead the people with?
Ugh. Shift your perspective. Our perspective of things are we as humans try to see things as black and white a lot of the times, right? Going back to the good and evil, joy and pain. There are a lot of things that contrast joy that are not necessarily pain. There are a lot of things that contrast good that are not necessarily evil. Good and evil are subjective. Joy is a fruit of the spirit. Love is a fruit of the spirit. We can't view these things as I think actually Jay said it as knowing these things as having experienced this thing. Knowing is an intimacy with a thing. So I have to become intimate with good. I have to become intimate with love. I have to become intimate with joy. I have to become intimate with truth. And there's a process to that intimacy that oftentimes is going through things that don't necessarily reflect or reciprocate what that thing is. And it's not that you have to experience a negative to receive a positive, but there's a process to becoming intimate with truth. And that process is a journey that, I mean, every human experiences in a different way. So the process is the beautiful part, not the end. We often approach things trying to get to God when God has been there the entire time throughout the entire process. So perceiving God allows us to draw nearer to him, which allows us to see his vantage of a thing. Because our vantage, we have this limited slither in time when his lens is eternal. So he's with us this whole process, and this whole process, we have to learn to enjoy. It's not the end; it's the entire thing that allows us to appreciate the end more.
Well, there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say thank y'all immensely for joining us this evening, wherever you might have joined us from. If you wanted to catch it on the replay, please do hit share wherever you are, whether you be on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube, whatever. Like, subscribe, share, copy the link, give it to somebody, all of that stuff. We went way longer, but I think we approached truth tonight, and I think that's the important part. And I appreciate all of y'all in the chat. You got to say a little bit this year, the end of this year, about what we've been doing when it comes to when men are intimate. And so next year, if the Lord says the same, we're going to keep doing this. We're going to keep moving forward and having conversations and tussling with things. And if that's something that you want to see, let us know that. You know what I mean? Send us a message. Tell us if you appreciated it. Tell us what you want to hear us talk about. Tell us, pray for us. Bring God into it. You know what I mean? Like, just do what you see fit to encourage us along the way, because encouragement is helpful. Encouragement is helpful. I love y'all immensely. My brothers on here, this is it's kind of a dream come true. You know what I'm saying? Like, I really appreciate us locking in for these last few weeks. And I feel like I need to say that publicly, right? Like, we locked in and we held each other up, and trying to do a thing that we felt like God was calling us to do. And I think that we're just beginning to see the fruit. So I love y'all immensely. All right. Enough of the sappy. It's been 2 hours. We'll see y'all later.
Bye.